Undercover work in New York City is a volunteer group. You volunteer to become a narcotics division undercover, which I did. Then they
Because
had,
you're risking your life more than a normal position, right?
well, you are in a sense. I mean, look, remember in those days, those were the days of the Black Liberation Army, the Weather Underground. I mean, guys with uniform on.
The mob was in its height.
Well,
everything.
Yeah, but the mob didn't make war and killing cops as a hobby. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of stayed away from that. But these, the other groups, if you were in uniform, you had a problem. I was in uniform in the early 70s. I was up in Spanish Harlem in the 23rd Precinct. My partner was Ray Kelly, former police commissioner in New York City Police Department.
Your actual partner.
My partner. Me
Wow.
and him, we made a bunch of gun collars together. Believe me when I tell you, we were in we were in a bag in uniform. And Bob Gianelli, he's passed away now. Bobby was retired as the chief of patrol. He was in charge of every single uniformed cop in the city, 26,000 guys. Bobby handled them all. He was our third partner. Talented guys in that car, except for me, of course. I wanted to be an undercover because I couldn't see myself going through 20 years in a job pointing out the Empire State Building to tourists. Instead of, hey, cat, it's the Empire State Building, man. Just look up. Officer, where's the Empire State Building? Look up, cat. You know what I mean? When you see that really big, tall, pointy building, that's it. Think King Kong. What did he climb? Come on, tell me. So I could see myself, though, reflecting belt and a whistle. It wasn't going to be me. So, in any event, as I say, you volunteer for the Narcotics Undercover Unit, and then you had to volunteer for this broadsword because this was going to be specifically in Alphabet City, which is an area in New York City. It's from First Street to 10th Street, from Zold Place, SZOLD Place, a lot of people don't even know where that is, to Houston, okay, square, about 10 blocks square. In those days, the community did not want police in that area, and the police and the community came to an understanding that there would never be cops in those 10 streets unless there was an emergency. They didn't want cops or firemen around unless there was some kind of an emergency. So there was no help there. Okay, if you went in and bought dope there,
you were okay. You weren't going to get arrested.
You were on your own. So yeah, it was a double volunteer job. They brought in a bunch of guys from around the country, undercovers, federal undercovers, but they housed them in a place. It was a Flagship Hotel. Flagship Hotel was up on 10th Avenue. They just stayed in there because they couldn't get out of their own. It was a little more difficult for them to get over in the streets. So myself and a couple of other guys, half a dozen people from the Narcotics Undercover Unit, went in there on a regular basis. We turned out at 555 West 57th, went down there and bought $25 bags of brown Mexican heroin from the junkies. The idea was, from the dealers, to find out where the narcotics was coming from. They wanted to do Q and Q on them, which is quantitative and qualitative assessment of the narcotics. And it turned out to be it was all coming from Mexico. That's where the brown stuff was coming. It was a little dangerous. But I had a lot of fun. It was a good time. I almost got run over. I almost got killed a few times, but it just comes with it. I came out of a building one time. I was making a buy up in a building, and I came down, and there were three guys right in front of the building, over a car, leaning over the hood of a car with rifles, firing at three more guys right across the street, right back at them. And they were just having a gunfight back and forth. And I came out of the building and went, oh, boy, let me just stay in an extra few minutes and mind my business in here.
Crazy.
But it was wide open. I mean, those 10 blocks were it was Dodge City, baby.
It was like a wild, wild west in the middle of a metropolitan city.
That's what the community wanted. They wanted no police presence unless there was an emergency. Firemen. I mean, they fired the firemen all the time. They shot at the fire trucks, shot at the firemen. It was a tough neighborhood. And that's not that long ago, baby. That's only...
No, I remember. I grew up in this area.
It's 30 years ago.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
In any event, what was so exceptional about the last session we had here, I known the gentleman for about 3 years.
Right.
And I don't think I've ever had a friend that's had the disease, not openly, ever in my life.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know he was going to do what he did.
Very brave of him to say that, right? I mean, I don't know how many...
My friend, the cameras couldn't capture what was going through my mind and my heart at that moment because I know how he put himself on the line. There was a lot of our friends in these last couple of days, the phone calls I got that never knew.
Yeah.
Some of them were angry. Some of them were sad, that they never knew what he might, because you got to always put yourself in someone else's shoes, right? It's the golden rule that they say, right? You make the world more compassionate. I was taken by surprise. I had no idea. The doc has known him for about 2 years.
Right.
You know, come and go. You know, we all smoke stogies over there
Right.
at the cigar lounge, and
Well, it was a gutsy call in his book. You know what was cute about the guy? There's a grown man. He's an ex-narcotics addicted fella. Managed, God bless him, and managed to kick that
to survive.
Another home run, really. In life.
5 times OD'd. It's crazy.
It is crazy, really. But I, you know what it was? In watching it, it was like he was telling you something just between you and him. I'm only going to tell you because you're my friend. I'm just going to tell you this. But Kump, you're on camera. You're on a microphone. You got the cans on. You're telling everybody now. You know what I mean? It was. I suppose he got it. You know what I mean? That he was outing himself that way. But
it was an emotional night, man.
He was a beautiful
after
guy.
he left,
Guy.
me and Al, we didn't sleep that night. We just processing. I was processing as a friend. But wow. In any event, it's why I love what we do here. You just never know.
It breaks out, man. Yeah, you don't know what's going to come out.
And he really put himself on the line for me. He didn't have to do that, you know. And I told him, I know we're not live yet. We'll be live one day.
Yeah.
I said, you want me to cut that out? He goes, I promise you, I tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And you know, he was saying for weeks, I got a story for you. I'm thinking, how different can his drug story be? I mean, I've heard a lot of things on TV.
Right.
How much different can his story be? Maybe he's going to reveal, you know, he raped somebody. Who the hell? I said, but how much? When he came out with that, and I'm thinking there's no way somebody could have lived from the early days either, right? In the early 80s. I'm
Buddy,
like,
I got to be honest with you. Nobody, I mean, there was no drugs. There was
the only one we
knew
knew of was Magic Johnson, and that's where, like,
Right.
his name is, he is Magic, because how the hell is he still alive?
Yep.
So unbelievable stuff. But interesting that you were actually a part of that. And, you know, I had brought up some other things, and no one could really, did they really call it Blue Magic like the movie, the heroin at that time?
No.
So that was just a name for the movie, make it sound
The
cool.
guy, you were looking for the guy's name. That was
Frank something?
Frank Lucas.
Frank Lucas.
It's called Frank Lucas and the Country Boys was his crew. Okay, they were North Carolina guys. He came up to New York City. He had connections up here. He was mentored by Bumpy Johnson, who was a major black everything.
He was like the Black Godfather.
He was the black guy. There's a show. There you go. There's a show on TV now, on cable. He was the black guy. He was mentored by him. Very sharp guy. Frank Lucas. Actually, I knew Frank Lucas way before narcotics and anything. Frank Lucas and my father were in competition in the dry cleaning business in Hollis, out in Queens. Frank Lucas had a dry cleaner, and my own man did, so we were always in competition with them. So I knew Frank Lucas from that, and then the way life brought us around. His guys went into the Army. His friends went into the Army. Okay, and Vietnam broke out. They wound up as tech sergeants. You know, people in a little bit with some authority. They worked out of a place called Tan Son Nhut, which is an airport about 2 miles west of Saigon, and they had access to just about anything they needed. And what they used the body bags. Okay,
so that part of the movie was true.
That part of the movie is absolutely true. What doesn't get tossed? What doesn't get searched when it comes back to the States? The body bags. So he made a deal with a group of people out there called the Bunyasaks. I ran into one of them in New York City. His name was Natapunk Bunyasak, and I had to hit him over the head with a .45 automatic, but that's a whole other story. But the Bunyasaks were big, major suppliers in what was called the Golden Triangle. That's Burma, Laos, Thailand. Okay? They brought in the stuff pure. There are approximately seven levels between the guy that imports heroin and the guy that sells heroin to your school kid in the schoolyard.
Steps to get it to the hands of the consumer.
Exactly. It's pure. They cut it down. They whack it. Each guy whacks it down a little bit more, takes his end. Each guy makes a profit until it gets down to the schoolyard. Okay, until you get down to bags like the gentleman last night was shooting. Okay, shooting 10 bags a day, he said.
That's a lot, right?
Pretty much. You got to see a lot of TVs, man. You got to rob a lot of little old ladies to make that.
And they will when they're on it. I mean, they will, right? I mean, these people will go crazy when they're on it, no?
Well, look, if I make, yes, they were quite focused on getting their heroin every day.
At any cost.
Nothing compared to crack. Crack was we'll talk about crack another day. That's a whole other story. But what Frank Lucas did is he took the pure heroin and cut it down to dime bags. Okay? he cut out all of the middlemen. There were no, all of the profits that was possible to make by all of these levels. He made every single level.
He was killing it.
Of profit, killing it. Forget about it. He owned the business. Okay, he owned it all. And I made buys. If I told his people that I wanted a kilo of heroin, I got 4,000 $10 bags. And you had to count all of them. It was very time consuming because once you make a buy, you have to do what's called sign and seal. You got to initial each bag.
Wow.
1 of 4,000. Initial 2 of 4,000. It takes you an hour to buy the dope and 3 days to get it into a bag so you can send it to the lab.
Each bag's got to be autographed.
Each bag's got to be autographed and numbered. Sign and seal.
For inventory.
Okay, so you got 4,000 bags at a time from him. Okay.
You're a good counter, huh?
The story that you. Yeah. Well, sometimes you go nuts. Believe me when I tell you something. Sometimes you go crazy. What happens is that you get around to making these buys. You get around to ingratiating yourself to the people. And Frank, he had his whole family involved in this. His mother, his brother Chili was already in the witness protection program, and Frank Lucas got arrested. When he did get arrested, he flipped over immediately. He rolled right over. I mean, he went to jail, but he rolled over. He gave up 37 murders the next day. Wow. He cleared 37 murders. But the movie that you talk about, what was it, American Gangster?
American Gangster,
American Gangster. It was written by Nick Pileggi, very, very well-known guy. Pileggi, for that movie, he doped together about a dozen street stories, okay, street legends, okay? In the movie, you got this guy, Richie, from New Jersey. He was played by Russell Crowe. Richie was a real guy. He used to come and try to hang around with narcotics guys.
Did you know him?
I didn't know him. I met
The
him.
real guy.
The real guy.
The story accurately portrays him?
No, not at all. He wasn't allowed to hang around with us. Okay. He's not one of us. Look, there's an adage in the police department. It's a very simple one. When you're in, you're a guest. When you're out, you're a pest. Okay? He was a pest. He wasn't allowed to stay with us. I was in Special Investigations Unit, which is the unit that was portrayed in The Prince of the City, if anybody ever saw that movie. I was in that unit. The whole unit got locked up. 75 guys in that unit, 54 guys got indicted by Maurice Najari, who's a special narcotics prosecutor back then. That's a whole other story. That's a whole other episode.
This is when, eventually, he definitely got to launch your own show, Arthur. You got way too much stuff coming out. You got stories. But this is history that people need. It's different when you read about it. It's different when you hear about it from the horse's mouth.
Well, I was there. That's what I did for a living.
It's amazing.
That's what I did.
It's amazing that you're still here. That was a dangerous time in New York.
Buddy, look, there's a few tricks to doing that sort of work. And believe me when I tell you, some of it is, a large part of it is being honest. Okay, being an honest guy. I bought many people I bought narcotics from, and they were arrested as a result of their sale of narcotics to a police officer, okay? Not one of them that I ever entrap, put something in their pocket. It's called flaking.
Set them up or whatever.
Flake a guy. You understand? But taking narcotics and putting, never, ever once did I do that. Okay? Ever once. I walked into your place, your strength, a stranger, ingratiated myself to your friends in your place, ingratiated myself to you specifically, and had you sell drugs to me. Now, a lot of guys say they're undercovers. They use undercover very loosely these days. Okay? All cops in soft clothes call themselves an undercover. That's not true. They're just cops in soft clothes, plain clothes, whatever you want to call it. An undercover's job is to gain information and intelligence. That's what you do. And in my case, specifically, buy drugs.